Hey, it's Barry.
Hey, it's Brian.
And welcome back to the Collecti-Bros podcast. On this episode of Is It Worth It?, we're going to go over Todd McFarlane's Spawn, the video game for the Super Nintendo. Pretty
Todd
excited.
McFarlane Spawn, the video game.
Todd McFarlane. Did I say that? Did
I don't
say
know.
it
It's
right?
just a funny long title, man. I love that shit.
Todd McFarlane Spawn, the video game. Because knowing Todd, he's got to have his name on it. So you know it's Todd's.
You're right. In case there's any other confusion with Spawn with any other characters, you know.
Yeah. With any other, you got to know. He has to have his stamp on it. Before that, we'll go over nothing. No, real quick, we'll just social media. If you want to follow us, we're going to be on all the social medias at Collecti-Bros Pod. Primarily check out YouTube. We're going to have a Spawn YouTube video up. We had just, our last episode is also up on YouTube. It's Working Designs if you want to check that one out. And we're in the Discord, so if you'd like to join the Discord to talk to us, please check out the link to the episode, or any of the episodes, or any of the YouTube, or just anywhere. There's going to be a link to the Discord for an invite. So open invite to join if you'd like to talk. Throw your pickups on there, brag about what you got, I don't really care. Open invitation.
Shit talk us.
Yeah, sure, if you want to do that too. I suppose getting right into it. So Spawn for the Super Nintendo was a pretty easy pick for me. Spawn is like my favorite comic book character. I've always loved him since he was a kid, since I was a kid. And, you know, that's something that we share on the podcast, a similar interest. Brian, I think, is a lot more into comics than I am, especially...
Yeah, really, it's like the first thing I started collecting was comic books. My dad was really into comic books, and then I've stayed collecting my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
So... Spider-Man's my guy. I mean, if you can't tell by my name in the Discord, my gamer tag and all that. But yeah, Spawn's great, man. I've got a really funny story really quick to just interrupt you.
No,
when we were kids, like my mom, super religious. Spawn came out and it was like this, graphic, dynamic. But I thought the art was like amazing. It was cool. And my uncle's actually like in the comic book industry. He met Todd McFarlane before he blew up. Got 2 issues of Spawn 1 signed by him. And my dad was like, hold on to these, like, don't let your mom see him, she's gonna freak out. And he put him out in the garage to like protect him with the rest of his books and his long boxes and stuff. And we had a house fire and we lost him. So I had like 2 hot off the press issue 1 Spawns autographed by Todd McFarlane, and now I don't have them, and it sucks. But long history with Spawn, like been looking at it, reading it since the beginning. And
yeah, Spawn's it's still ongoing. We're at issue 300 and fuck all, whatever it is. I can't even keep up. He's got the whole Spawn universe thing because it's just blowing up so badly right now.
Spawn's still super relevant, man. Like when I was in my comic store, I sold a ton of Spawn stuff. People would come in asking for Spawn. Even in the video game spectrum, Call of Duty was that 2 years ago? They had the big Spawn crossover. I think
because I was just MIA this Halloween. So yeah, last year they had the crossover with Spawn in Warzone, and so there was a whole bunch of it was in the battle pass.
The whole season, the whole battle pass was Spawn, Halloween era.
Spawn stuff, Spawn characters, Spawn. I played the hell out of it because I was like, I need all the Spawns, and like we just don't play Call of Duty anymore.
Spawn's still super relevant. Is what I was trying to say. But back then, Spawn was huge.
Yeah, in the 90s, Spawn was the thing, and there was a dip off. Especially in the 2. I want to say the 220 to 280s.
It's after Capullo stopped doing the art and time.
Yeah.
After Todd left and handed the book over.
It was a really like tumultuous time for the book. That's why a lot of like the 250 issues are such low print, because like the stores weren't ordering them. They're really hard to get. Like that whole section is a huge dry area for me in my collection because it's hard to find them. And when you do find them, they're so expensive per book. And I'm like, I can't pay that
Collectors
much.
Don't come off them.
No.
Yeah.
So Spawn is like a really big thing for me. I've got a Spawn shrine at home, and the video games were ones that I really wanted to get all of them. And Spawn on the Super Nintendo was one of the expensive ones that was a feasible, okay, I think I can get this one. The Game Boy one, like, forget about it, bro.
I don't even see it.
I have the cart. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to get the box.
I see the cart around. I don't think I've ever seen a box in person.
Yeah, I've seen like YouTube or not YouTube listings, eBay listings, but like in person, I don't know. So
Never.
the Super Nintendo one was an attainable one for me. I don't want a lot of Super Nintendo games, and I actually like couldn't give a singular rat's ass about most beat 'em ups. So the fact that I like wanted this one only because it was Spawn.
Yeah.
Normally, I probably would not play this kind of game. So just putting it out there, I'm not a beat 'em up guy, but I'm a Spawn guy. So therefore, now I am a Spawn beat 'em up guy. You know, I play Warzone for Spawn, so...
Yeah, this one checks a lot of my boxes to use one of our old favorites. I mean, I love superheroes, I love comics, I love the Super Nintendo. I own a cartridge copy of this game. I'd love to get a full copy, but I was trying to find Barry Hurst first. I think we talked about it last episode.
Difficult. Yeah. Finding the toilet water one.
Yeah.
So, this was a game I finally picked up this year on a trip out west, so I really wanted to include it as like one of the last ones for this year, just to kind of end the year off for my choices.
It's a good choice because I would eventually got to this one.
So Spawn, the video game, came out in 1995 in North America and Europe. This did not release in Japan, which curiously enough, it was developed by a Japanese game studio called
Your luck's better than mine.
Ukiyote.
That's pretty good.
Ukiyote. I don't know. Honestly, they didn't really develop anything except for Metal Slug, first and second mission, I believe. And then I don't even know if they formally like closed, because just next thing you know, like they fizzled out of existence because everyone went to work for SNK.
Yeah, I saw a really interesting article online where basically they got their start. They did Hook for the Super Nintendo. And if you guys know, that version's completely different than the Genesis version. So it was a nice, like, their stamp of the kind of game they're trying to make. But then SNK was offering them like side work to like assist with Neo Geo games.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they did a couple of the King of Fighters, and then they did
I think it was
the first Metal Slug, one of the art directors or something worked on. So like more and more people at the studios kept getting jobs from SNK.
Yeah.
And finally, when the Neo Geo Pocket Color came out, they were like, "Hey, we need assist with this." So like the whole studio basically went to go work for SNK. In the article I saw, the head of the studio was just like, "Yeah, we had to close because all of our employees left to go work for SNK."
Yeah,
which, as a Metal Slug fan, that's cool, but sucks the studio closed.
Yeah, the history of that company is interesting, but it's just the choice of this company to develop this game is really... I would be curious on why they were chosen, or why they picked it up, because it just doesn't make a lot of sense for a Japanese game development studio that does not deal with beat-em-ups.
And like the hottest comic property
to make an American comic book hero, anti-hero game that doesn't release in Japan.
Right.
It's just an odd combination.
My only thought, like my, big indie comics heart is saying like maybe Todd being like, the Mount Rushmore of indie comics was like, let me go find a small indie studio to help make this game. That's my headcanon. I have no idea the validity of that, but that'd be cool.
Game indie developer.
Just kind of be like, let me pass it on,
Yeah.
Because I have no other explanation whatsoever.
Yeah, this game is just a very interesting, like, kind of background history on it, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but, like, here we are. And, like, a lot of times when you combine a lot of elements like that, you'd be like, how did this even happen? And there's no way it's going to happen.
Right.
It exists, and it's out, and it works.
Yeah.
It's not like, it released half broken or anything.
Right.
Like, it's a respectable game.
Oh, yeah.
So, somehow they did it.
Yeah.
But, I mean... As far as like the story and stuff, we'll get into that specifically. This game was reviewed, I want to say, mixed. Mm-hmm. Just to quote some things here, it looks like graphics, animations, and music were praised.
Makes sense after playing it.
But some people said like it's good for a 16-bit system, but low quality compared to 32-bit.
Oh, what, a 32X at the time?
Yeah, and I'm just like, okay, like, that's fine, but it's out on Super Nintendo.
Right.
So, we'll touch on the graphics, but, like, I don't know why the graphics would have been criticized, in my opinion. Yeah. I mean, if you really want to talk about the shittiest Super Nintendo graphics you've ever seen, like, please go look at our Primal Rage video. Because, like, oh my god, you know?
Yeah, I think that was a later release than this, too. By a bigger studio.
Yeah, that one... Woofa. So, and then other people thought the gameplay wasn't innovative, It wasn't varied enough, which I disagree with, but we'll also get into that one. Some said that the special moves are too difficult to perform, but then others said the special moves were a highlight of the game. So I don't know, it's a lot of like back and forth between like one group of people likes it and one group of people doesn't, but there's not like a unanimous this was good or this was bad on anything on it.
Mm-hmm.
So
it definitely makes for more interesting conversation.
Yeah, it's a very decisive, like kind of honest, truly mixed reviews. Some people found it was really faithful to the comics. Others found it was unsatisfying. It doesn't have the feel of the comic.
What IGN say? That's the real question.
IGN?
I'm just being an asshole.
I don't even know if IGN
too much
had
necroplasm.
something at the end. Too much necroplasm. You know, let's see. A reviewer for Next Generation was even more condemning and quoted, "Suffering from problems with just about everything, a lack of speed, poor play control, lousy graphics, and this completely generic attempt at a video game is less enjoyable than a skin rash."
Ouch, that's a little harsh.
Yeah, so, but then it also goes on to say most reviewers recommended this for the comic book fans.
For sure.
So, and I always find that really interesting where it's like, if you think this game is dog shit, but you're still gonna
recommend
it for a comic book fan, it's like, oh, well, you know this group of people will look past everything because it's Spawn.
It's a weird philosophy when it comes to reviewing, man. It's either good or it's bad, and there's some people can enjoy shit more than others. Don't get me wrong, that's not what I'm saying, but whatever. Hot take, brother.
Yeah, and I think we've said it on this podcast a couple times before, where it's like, it doesn't matter, I'm gonna play it.
Yeah.
You know, we have our respective properties. I know we've said it a couple times on this podcast where we're like, oh, it doesn't matter if it's good or bad, I'm still gonna play it because of XYZ. You know, like, if a game came out where they were like, oh, this is the worst Witcher game ever to come out, like, I'm still gonna play it, but at the same time,
you'll say it sucks if it sucks.
Yeah, I'll say it sucks, but it's like, I wouldn't recommend it to somebody.
Right.
You know, I would never recommend, if I'm playing something, okay, let me just put this in perspective. If I'm playing, not this game, we'll just talk in generic terms because I'm not saying this game is bad, but if I'm playing a Spawn game, because I love Spawn, I don't like beat 'em ups, right? But I want to play this game because it's Spawn, and I try to play it. Realistically, if the game is bad, I'm going to say, hey, this game sucks. Mm-hmm. But I still want to play it because it's Spawn. Never in that sentence would I say, you should also play
this
it.
This is great because it's Spawn, and that's a free pass.
No, that's not a free pass.
Clearly, we already said it. Huge Spider-Man fan. Motherfucker's permanently tattooed on my body. Like, I love Spider-Man. I got some shitty Spider-Man games on my shelf, brother. You better believe it. Like, there's nothing wrong with that, being objective. Like, good God. No, the only other observation I have, it's really funny for the developer being so small and indie, if you will. Acclaim published this, and I feel like they published every superhero game back in the day. Like, every single Super Nintendo game that I can think of that's a superhero game is published by Acclaim. Regardless if it's DC, Marvel, Independent, I feel like they had the lock on comic book license. I thought that was kind of a funny parallel.
Regardless of how you feel about reviews, whether you think they're necessary or a scourge on the face of this planet, that's just the reality of it. This game was professionally, in quotes, critically reviewed mixed. But we're going to review it on what we thought of the game because we played it. So, on to the story. The story of this game doesn't really follow the comics. It is a self-contained individual story for this game. I would have been curious on what it would have been like if it started you at, the first issue and went up to issue 15 or whatever. But it is a self-contained story starring Spawn, Al Simmons. If you don't know anything about Spawn, he, in a nutshell, dies, kind of sort of sells his soul to the devil / Malbolgia / a fat, weird-looking demon thing to come back. And then he has this, like, what do you call it? Symbiote.
Parasite.
Symbiote thing that sticks to him, which I think is really funny because Venom is basically Todd McFarlane's. He was introduced through Todd McFarlane's run of Spider-Man, and is technically Venom his creation?
He's a co-creator for sure. People get super technical and like, oh, you appear in Spectacular Spider-Man First of the Black Suit or Secret Wars. Shut the fuck up. They weren't thinking this long term back then. But yeah, he's Todd McFarlane's co-creation. You can tell there's definitely inspiration. Todd says he came up with Spawn when he was in high school, but like the character.
He says he has drawings of Spawn from high school. I don't know if
all the elements were fully incorporated. Because even like the suit being a parasite, K7 Letha came later in the run. You know, it wasn't like initial part of the origin.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of parallels to Spawn and Venom, and I think Todd holds on to Venom so tightly just because of the popularity of that character. Whether or not he was a true creator or a co-creator or anything, but the iconic tongue.
Yeah, tongue and teeth, bro. That's
the
Todd
tongue
shit.
and teeth is Todd.
The finger claws. Like there's certain things that it's like you can definitely tell Spawn was inspired by him and Eric Larson, which both went on to Image.
Yeah,
funny enough.
Both went on to co-creators of Image or co-founders.
Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, Wallace Portillo. Jim Lee had to give up a lot of stuff when he took DC over.
Yeah.
But that's a whole nother...
Yep, that's a whole other
Maybe
conversation.
We'll talk about that shit. And,
yeah, that's true. But Todd, when something... The interesting thing about Todd McFarlane is when he has an idea, he chokes it to death and then goes full speed.
All in.
He's an all-in guy. So for Spawn to last this long and him to stay so committed to his comic book character, shows. But I think if he didn't have that commitment and drive, I don't think it would be where it is now.
Yeah, I agree.
So just to see the consistency of it through the thick and the thin, is what we have now. So this game kind of staying true to that is interesting because it has a weird history with the Super Nintendo and a weird history with development and a weird history with reception.
It is weird too because eventually McFarlane didn't become the main writer on Spawn, but he would still pitch the idea and let other people flesh it out. Mm-hmm. For him to give up his baby so soon into its inception is kind of interesting to me. Mike Glam was the guy that gets a story credit for this game. So for Todd to give up his baby so soon.
No, he didn't give it up. It's called Todd McFarlane's Spawn.
I hear you. For not to be I'm writing this and go my way.
I think that we're kind of getting off topic on the story part, but I think as a whole, I mean, it's relevant to the story because he didn't write the story, but as a whole, I think he's more inclined to hand Spawn out as a property to get it out there.
Oh, definitely, especially back then.
But as long as his name is still attached to it and everyone is making it very clear it's Todd McFarlane's Spawn,
way to put it. Yeah.
He'll do it.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, for sure.
So, the story... It's not in any comics. As far as the story goes, the main villain, it's the self-contained story is there's a fallen angel crusader named the Mad One, and it was made specifically for this game. He does not appear in any of the comics, as far as I'm aware.
First appearance of the Mad One.
Get
it graded.
Kidnapped 13 innocent children, including Al's stepdaughter, Cyan, which is... I guess she is. Well, she's not. I don't know why.
I didn't think that was too later, bro. It's been a while since I've read Spawn, but...
Okay, well, Cyan is the daughter of Terry and Wanda. So after Al dies, his wife gets remarried and they have a kid. So I don't really know why people call her his stepdaughter, because she really has nothing to do with him. Am I remembering that wrong?
So, I said, I'm kind of rusty in the comics, but I remember, the HBO shows, she had a way more pivotal part where, they made Spawn, the defender of kids, and especially in the early issues and stuff, I remember the HBO show, the animated series, she had a really big part with, she's the one that would talk to him, wouldn't be scared of him, because he has, hamburger helper burnt face, right? So everybody's terrified as soon as they see him. But I remember she was, the one that would, actually talk to him and be nice to him. As far as the comics, though, I'm kind of rusty, man. I'm not gonna sit here and bullshit.
No, I'm not wrong. He doesn't really have a tie. He has a tie to her in the sense that her mom is his widow, I suppose. But Cyan's actual father is not Al Simmons. Is not Spawn. Right. And I think he kind of views her as his own daughter in a weird sense because
it's the life he was supposed to have.
Yeah, he does view that as the life he's Terry is living his life.
Right.
But I mean, that's not really relevant to the game, but she is one of the specific children that is stolen. So he's got a direct and personal tie to this character and the event that's happening with the villain.
Because the villain's like a fallen angel, he's got to get like the souls to charge this weapon to defeat Malebolgia, right?
Yeah, so the ultimate goal is he's going to use these kids to charge and lock their soul into something called the Orb of Purity, which you can imagine you need children, souls of the pure, to put in the Orb of Purity, and that is to destroy Malebolgia once and for all, which is interesting because, like, Malebolgia is also our villain. Like, you would imagine enemy and my enemy is my friend, but also enemy and my enemy is stealing children and sucking their souls into an orb.
Right.
So it's kind of more of like, I agree with the end result, but not the method type deal. Just kind of why we're fighting him.
Another parallel to the comics, like, super appropriate. One of the biggest themes for Spawn, especially the early stuff, was like, what's really evil? Like, yeah, Spawn's technically this demon, granted with demon powers, but he's a good, Al Simmons is a good guy. He was a fucking mercenary for hire, so he's not a great guy, but he's trying to, like, redeem himself through acts of hell. You know, it's interesting.
I mean, he dies in a war, basically.
Yeah.
If I'm remembering that right,
I think doesn't he get, like, friendly fired by his buddy betrays him or something?
Like, on a mission?
Yeah, because, like, he's basically a mercenary, like, for hire, right? And they go to, like, I want to say it's like Final Fantasy VII thing where they go to blow up a company or something.
Yeah, his friend, Chapel. It's Chapel.
Yep.
His friend is secretly hired to kill him and basically burns him alive and sends him to hell.
Yeah.
That's why he's Hamburger Face.
Yes.
So, like, you know, everyone, the super popular thing to know is Deadpool. When Deadpool takes that mask off and he's, like, disgustingly to look at, this is exactly the same thing.
Right.
And now that I'm thinking about it, I don't really know when fucking Liefeld made Deadpool, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there you go. There's your tie. Rob Liefeld and Todd McFarlane were like big old buds.
I mean, look, not to get too off topic, the 90s comic book was huge, and it was like, who could be the edgiest? Who could be the pointiest swords, gunniest guns,
I mean,
pouches,
look at Deadpool's design and then look at Spawn's design. Like, there's some correlations there.
All these guys had a style, man.
Mm-hmm.
And,
the 90s had a style. And, like,
which I love. I'm a 90s kid, bro.
Yeah, you can see what stayed popular. But, like, imagine Deadpool, just a different, like, a non-Marvel Deadpool.
The dynamic Deadpool with chains and a badass cape.
Yeah, the cape. And the cape is sentient. The cape does its own thing. Just kind of tight.
Yeah.
But that's the basis story of this game. So your entire goal is to stop the Mad One so you can get your kid back. That's not actually your kid. And beat Malebolgia's ass at the end of it.
Yeah.
It's, you know, but I will say, you know, the Mad One is made for this game, but you've also got characters from the comic like Clown, Violator, a lot of the really popular ones. Angela shows up. We've got Redeemer, Overkill, she's not super popular, but like the very, very early, like, Monster of the Week almost style.
Early Spawn fan, it's fun to see some of these guys pop up, man.
Yep.
Like,
I mean, we're not talking about the onesie twosies from something further on, like, you know, the ones that are on the cover.
Yeah.
So.
No, it's interesting for this story. There's not a lot of meat on the bones, but in a weird way, it feels like early Spawn issues, man, where it was kind of like, yeah, there's this overall story they're trying to tell, but it's kind of like villain of the week type of thing, getting in his way of, you know, redeeming himself, getting his vengeance.
Mm-hmm.
It feels very appropriate if you're reading like the first 10 issues of Spawn. It fits in there somewhere. I don't know where, but it fits in somewhere.
And I will say, like, it's sort of in a graphical point for this podcast too, but this game is a video game, but they do comic book style cutscenes to propel that story in a sense of, like, they wanted it to play as a game, but the story go forward as a comic, and it gives you those panels and the text bubbles and, like, everything, and it does look like a comic, and it, not to speak too soon, but it looks pretty great for Pixel.
Definitely appreciate it as a comic book fan. Looked cool. I think it's a lot of these issues I have now with interpretations of shit, they veer too far from source material. Like, even though this isn't identical, you can tell it's very heavily inspired by the comic book character Spawn.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. Like, props to this small studio.
The game is short and the story is short, so we're going to move on to the gameplay. This is a side-scroller beat-em-up, and it only goes left to right, up and down. It does not go forward, back like similar games like Ninja Turtles. Yeah, like almost like every other one. Ninja Turtles, Golden Axe, like those are the ones where you can move on the ground in 4 directions and then you can jump up and down on another axis. This one is just left to right, up and down, and you're locked in there.
It's like almost a side-scrolling beat 'em up. It's the best way to describe it.
Yeah, it is really a side-scrolling beat 'em up, but it also has platformer mechanics.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
It does a lot of things different. I'll give it that.
So it's not just you walk over and... It's a side-scroller, beat-em-up, platformer, fighting game, sort of at the same time.
Yeah, it's definitely got
it's not like you
mechanics.
just like it's not like you walk to the side of the screen and beating up enemies on the way, and then you just keep sliding left and right and sliding left and right, and then you ultimately get into a boss and you fight him. Like there's up and down. You have to traverse the levels vertically, and then not only is it just like punch, punch, kick, kick. Like there are a million buttons to hit.
There's so many moves you can pull off, dude.
There's a lot of moves. There are, let me see, I wrote it down, 20 different types of attacks, which all of these are listed in the manual. So if you want to know, and it's not one of the, and I don't agree with this, but one of the criticisms of this game is, oh, it doesn't tell you how to do any of these moves. It doesn't teach you any of these moves. We don't know what we're doing. And I'm like, yeah, because you guys are emulating it and you're not reading a damn manual. You know, like, that time period, especially with cartridge games, like, that manual was necessary.
Right.
You need that manual to do this game because they only have so much data available on these cartridges. There's not a lot of room to work with.
Mm-mm.
I mean, if you're looking at old games where they've had to shrink words down and abbreviated words because they can't fit that many characters inside of it because the memory won't allow it.
Right.
You know, like sword, like SWD, it's going to be sword. Like they can't put sword because there's not enough data to fit that whole word.
It's definitely a criticism through modern eyes, I think.
Yes.
This is pretty standard for games back then.
Yeah, we're really used to it. Mm-hmm, we're used to quality of life. Yeah. But I mean, like there's scans. If you don't know how to do the moves, just look at the scans. Like Super Nintendo games should be treated as you're going to need the manual, you better go look for it.
I agree.
So
you want to use modern eyes, use the internet. It's modern too.
Yeah, that is a great point. But there's 20 different types of attacks. All of them are annotated inside of the manual, so it's not a surprise you are given the resources to know how to do all of them. And there are also 8 special attacks. Now, the difference between those is like your normal attacks are going to be your punch, your kick, but you also have something like a sliding kick, like a crouch slide kick, or a chain attack, or an uppercut. The special attacks are using necroplasm. And necroplasm for Spawn is this like green, it's not like a liquid, but
it's an energy source. I mean,
it's
I don't
kind
want to
of
get
like
too technical, but
yeah, it's kind of like a greenish, I would imagine like a greenish kind of electrical liquid-ish energy source, kind of. It's a plasm.
It's plasm.
It's plasm.
It's necroplasm.
And necroplasm.
Just watch your autocorrect.
Yeah, yeah. Necroplasm moves there's 8 of them. They're special attacks, and the thing about the necroplasm is you only have a limited amount use of them in a way that is very similar to the comics, which I think is really interesting.
I love it.
So I love it too. There's a special power, and every time you use a special power, it'll drain the necroplasm, which is limited to a timer, and it starts at the value of 9999. So each different special power uses a different quantity of necroplasm, and the whole idea is the more Spawn uses his powers, the less time he has free.
Mm-hmm.
So once that timer hits 0, his soul is done. He is Malbolgia's.
Yep.
So the battle with him and Malbolgia is constantly like trying to encourage him to use these powers, trying to put him in situations where he needs to use them, because the more Spawn uses those powers, the closer Malbolgia gets to owning him. It's kind of just how that works. So they put that in the game, which I think is really cool, as a timer of you have this much for the entirety of your game. Now,
use it wisely.
Use your necroplasm wisely. And it also, like, if you fall off the side of the map, you don't die. You turn into a little orb where you can fly forward, but it soaks up your necroplasm.
Mm-hmm.
And so once that necroplasm timer hits 0, it's game over.
Yeah, as a comic book fan, that was nice, because if you guys read the first, I don't know, like, early issues of Spawn, it's constant up in there where he's like, this is how much necroplasm I have, and they drew it just like in the game where it's a bar with a 999 or whatever.
It's a constant reminder.
And like as you're reading the issues more and more, it'll tick down when he uses it. It was so cool, man. Like as a comic fan, that was great.
And like that's one of the touch. And that's one of the things where I'm just like I argue against the innovative gameplay aspect where it's like this game also has unlimited continues. Mm-hmm. It's not built like an arcade game where you put in quarters in.
Right.
It has unlimited continue, it has a password system, and and you don't die. You just play the game as long as you can until you beat it or your necroplasm gets to 0 or you turn the game off.
Yep.
Like, there's no death in this game. There's no, if the boss beats you, you just start back at the beginning of that checkpoint. It's not like you have to redo the entire level. But, I mean, if you quit out and you have to put that password in there, it will reset things a little weirdly. Yeah. But the point of this whole game is you're playing it and redoing it and redoing it and redoing it as many times as you possibly can. Inside of that allotted timer, and your time is yours to do with it, and they're not going to stop you from continuing, or they're not going to make you restart. But having that constant timer up there is going to tell you, like, hey, better be careful with that necroplasm. You don't want to blow everything because you've got so many levels to go.
And to be clear, it's not a dwindling timer. Like, it is up to you whether you want to use your necroplasm. Like, you're just like Spawn. Mm-hmm. Like, it was really cool.
And it doesn't tick down on its own. It will only diminish itself when you use those special moves. Yep. So if you want to try and play the entire game without using any special moves, you can do that.
Yep.
Whether or not you can is another story because this game is hard.
I was going to say, yeah, they're giving you these unlimited continues and necroplasms that this game is hard as shit. Mm-hmm. But like you're saying, I think it's not to the point where it's just hard to be hard. They give you all the tools you need to succeed. And if you don't succeed with those tools, it's kind of your problem. It's kind of your fault.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that.
There was definitely some times in this game where we had to keep going and going and going.
Yeah, watch your YouTube.
Was it Redeemer that we were fighting?
Yeah, fuck him.
Anti-spawn.
But again, Redeemer was my fault because I kept mistiming the jump. And I was literally playing it like, I fucked this jump up. Like, while I was in the air, I knew I fucked the jump up.
And we had to go over and over and over to fight him. But, like, if we didn't use that special power, if we didn't use the necroplasm, like, our timer didn't go down. So it was a battle of will at that point, where it's like, how long do you want to sit here and try and fight this guy?
Yeah.
In a day and age now where we have access to something like save states, it's a lot easier for us to put it down and come back to it. Which I really appreciate that as a modern player.
Right.
But back then, like, having to go over and over and over and over and try and learn it. And there are some very tight windows for things.
Oh, yeah.
If you don't do things in a very specific way, you're not going to do it. Which I do have a criticism of. And I'm not sure if that makes it an artificial difficulty. Like, there was one part where we had to platform jump from one wall, slide over to another wall, and if you did not hit that pixel dead on, you were not going to make that wall jump.
There's 2 jumps I remember that I was like, fuck. And I thought it was my controller at first. I think
They're
some of it
hard.
was, but man, they are like, you cannot fuck up that jump. It has to be literally the tip of your toes off the wall. Perfect.
Yep. It has to be on. There is no room for wiggle on that one. And that's just a platforming mechanic. Yeah. I mean, one of them was tied to a health bar. Like there was like a trap in that area, and if you missed the jump, you were gonna get hit by the trap. Like you had to jump, and I'm sure it'll be in this YouTube video because we had to do it so many times.
You're gonna see me die a lot, by the way.
Yeah. You had to jump off of this platform. There's a platform that you would jump on, and your weight, as soon as you jumped on that platform, the weight of Spawn would lower the platform. Mm. So you had to immediately jump off of that platform and wall and sort of like wall cling slide. Like you can attach yourself to the wall and he'll do like a slide down. It's not like a sticky Spider-Man kind of deal. But you'd have to jump off of that platform before it dropped too low from your weight to stick to the wall while also dodging a spike above you, because if you jump too high at the wrong spot, the spike above you is going to hit you, damage you, and then make you fall. Yeah. So you had to dodge the spike above you to get to the wall in order to wall jump to the next portion.
I think it shot a fucking fireball too, and you had to like dodge. Yeah,
But the second you got to the wall to wall jump to slide, there was another enemy above you that would instantly shoot a fireball at the exact point that you hit on the wall. So it was...
Oh, yeah, and if you go off the screen, the fireball comes back. So it's not like you can just go off the screen and go up and get the timing down.
Yeah, and there was no room to like, I'll just slide down the wall a little bit so I can dodge the fireball. There's no fucking wall to slide down. Like, there was just nothing. So in that aspect, like, it was very difficult in specific areas. And I don't know if that was to make it frustrating or, like, why they chose to make some of those areas like that. Because there was enemies that you would have to fight that were really difficult, but I felt like, it's because I missed calculated that attack, or it's because I didn't pull off my move or my button combination in time or whatever. But the platforming being so hard was just something.
I think the platforming was my biggest critique also, not only for the wall jumping, but if you remember there's parts you have to glide and like your cape shoots out really wide, you just make your hitbox bigger when you glide. So it's almost like they give you the tool, hey, you can glide and kind of time your jump, but we're going to penalize you for doing it by making your hitbox huge because your cape's sentient, I guess, and takes damage. But there's give and take for everything, which I kind of appreciate. It feels like a natural difficulty in terms of even some of the jumps. Like if you fucked up the jump, you're going to miss it. I do appreciate that. But man, some of it makes you sweat. And there's times plenty where I'm just running past shit, you know, trying to get that next checkpoint because I know I'm going to die anyway and try to get my health back at the checkpoint when I come back.
Yep. There was a lot of, if you got to that checkpoint to the next part of the level with low health, you could die there and then just re-continue at the beginning of that checkpoint with full health. So a lot of this game was like praying we could get to the next checkpoint. So if we died, like
literally sprinting, just like let me just run ahead until it makes you fight enemies.
Let's hope. And then there'd be some where you couldn't run all the way to the end, and you would have to defeat a certain amount of enemies before you could continue that screen. So it wasn't like you could just run and dodge the whole game and not have to fight anything.
That's my biggest thing, man. It was hard, but it wasn't unfair. It gives you plenty of tools. Even block, you can block in this game with the cape.
Yep. It does take a little bit of your health down, but you can block.
Bounce back. So it's like there's give and take for almost everything, right? Even like using your necroplasm. Like if you get stuck, cool, shoot a fucking fireball, but there's a cost. I love that. They put thought into that give and take. For everything, there's an action and reaction. Like it's good game design, honestly.
What was I going to say? The controls, I think, were a little hard to pull off.
Yeah, some of the moves...
aspect where
I'm so sorry.
It was hard, it was hard for me to tell, because we played the physical cart on a Retron, just so it was easier for us to screen record, and you had hooked up a Super Nintendo controller, and then I tried it with the Retron controller, and everyone knows the Retron controller is dog shit. Horrible. But I couldn't tell if it was your controller.
I think it was based on some of the jumps.
Boo-boo.
Yeah, it's a second party super controller.
Because there were some things you were struggling with that I was even able to do with the Retron controller. Right. So I'm just not sure if some of those difficult parts were because we were hampered by a controller that wasn't great.
The more I think about it, I think it was because a lot of it's input based, right? So like the moves you pull off for the necroplasm are all like fighting combo moves, like think Street Fighter where you roll and then hold down the bumper and then push two buttons. I think it was very input based, so it's interesting. I don't think it's back then they had so many buttons on the controller, right? Now we have mapping and stuff, so I'm not trying to be critical of it, but there's times I'm like, God damn, I wish some of these were easier to pull off.
There's a lot.
Once you got them, I feel like once you got it the first time, you're like, okay, now this makes sense. Because even reading the manual, it'd be like, hey, hold the right bumper, then push these buttons, and then let go of this one,
Yeah, here's the thing, though, is like the Super Nintendo is a choice. Like this game needed a Genesis 6-button controller for a lot of the things it wanted to do. Especially if it's going to have a game where the movesets are kind of like a fighting style. Like, use a game that has a fighting style controller or a fight pad and give that extra button opportunity, because it was so hard to crap
when you're rolling.
Like I have to roll this D-pad and also like hold a bumper and hit a button at the same time, which is not intuitive. So it really would have benefited more, honestly, from the Genesis, in my opinion.
Maybe it's just me, but anytime I have to hold a bumper on a Super Nintendo controller, it just feels awkward.
I can't even tell if I'm actually holding the button.
I like the bumpers on the controller, but it's like every time I have to use them, I'm like, what the fuck am I using this on this controller? There's 4 face buttons.
I don't think there's a lot of games that really use the bumpers.
Mario Kart to do little bumps.
Little hop or whatever. But I think that's my biggest criticism of this game is I think that it wanted to do too much with the controller that they chose, for the console that they chose. I think that this game would have handled so much better on a Genesis.
Yeah, it's a super ambitious game, and there's a lot going on. And hats all the way off for that. But yeah, I agree. The controller and the controls are kind of top 2 or 3 biggest issues with this game. But yeah, to try something so ambitious from a studio that's not that big, that's the thing. Like, it's a hybrid game, right? So you got platforming, you got fighting. It's super ambitious. There's nothing else quite like it. And it's funny because I remember picking this game up when I first started getting retro games, because I love comic books and stuff. I remember being like, making sure it works when I got home, turned it on, was like, damn, this is hard. Oh, it's just to beat 'em up. I'll never play it. And after playing it, I'm like, hey man, not a lot of people talk about this game, and it's actually really unique and stands out just from a gameplay perspective alone. Like, it does everything different than every other fighting game / superhero game back then. So I can't stress this enough. It's really intriguing in that way. I think from a gameplay perspective, I think it's probably the best part about this game is just like how unique and how different it is. I'm not saying it's like a 10 out of 10 game or anything, but just the ambition behind it and how drastically different it is than every other beat 'em up you've played or every other superhero game you've played for the time, 16-bit era.
Right.
Yeah, definitely tried something ambitious and cool being Spawn because he's the indie darling too. Like, of course it's Spawn that tries something different and new,
I don't know. This is a horrible transition, but just like if you use too much necroplasm, we're out of time.
No!
We're not. I'm just trying to find a transition. We're going to move on to sound and music. Alright, so as far as the music goes, the composer of this was Harumi Fujita.
You already know you're going to do it better than me.
And best known for video game community in her work at Capcom. So some of the music that she's done: Ghosts and Goblins sound effects, Bionic Commando, arranged by somebody else. We've got Willow on the NES. Mega Man 3 NES.
Which is really big. I mean, Mega Man's known for its music, so she helped with that. That's awesome.
Skyblazer, Final Fight.
I think another really interesting one she worked on is Toomba.
Toomba's
known for its music also, so pretty cool.
Toomba 1, PS1.
Yeah,
yep. Strider.
Oh, yeah.
Strider.
There's a lot of heavy hitter NES titles in there. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, a lot of NES stuff in here.
And then I also thought it was really interesting. She's still working. She recently worked on Windjammers 2, which, as a Neo Geo fan, that's awesome. And it's kind of funny going back to everybody leaving for the company and working for SNK. Like, it comes full circle, I guess.
Right. It says that she composes music for stage performances and does audio consulting. So she's still kind of working, maybe not so much in the game industry, but audio consulting, especially having that experience of doing composing and sound effects. I'm not sure like who she contracted out to or anything like that, but
so Windjammers 2 was 2002, so like fairly recent.
2002 is not fairly recent.
I meant 2022. I'm sorry.
What
year is it?
2022.
It's almost like I got sent to hell and 20 years of my life went away.
God. What did you think of the music and the sound effects?
Thought the music was pretty good. The music kind of reminded me of Castlevania without the brass.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
You've got kind of like that spooky classical music, but it's not as rock and roll as Castlevania. I thought the music was very, very serviceable. I'm not going to put it on my Spotify playlist anytime soon, but like for most 16-bit games, especially from like a, small developer, definitely enjoyable. The sound effects, I can't really say the same thing. The sound effects are probably one of my biggest knocks on the game, honestly. They're just kind of generic. Nothing stands out. I think Spawn's, like, when he takes damage is, like, the most jarring because he's like, ah! Like, way louder than every other sound effect.
Yeah.
But the rest of them, it's kind of psh, 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 ah! Your typical beat-em-up sounds. And it's not, like, horrible. It fits the game. It does the job, right? I'm not going to sit here and be like, this automatically gets a 1 because of this. But it's, how unique the rest of the game is, it does stand out a little more how generic the sound is, the sound effects specifically.
I think it's interesting that like every other part of this I think is really successful for me in my opinion, but the sound portion being so weak makes sense. Because this is a game based off of a comic book. What do we have in a comic book? We don't have sound and music and sound effects. We have visuals, we have story, we have narrative and how things laid out. So and even then, like...
That's a good point, man.
Sure, like, a comic book doesn't have gameplay, but they've used elements of that comic story and of that character and the design and everything about him to directly influence the gameplay.
Spider-Man's going to be swinging on webs if there's a Spider-Man game. That makes sense.
Right,
really
but,
good.
like, comics, we don't have that direct connection with sound unless we have got, you know, a TV show that might have came out before a game. Or, you know, there's some things about Spawn that I think would be a given on sound effects. Chains. Like, if you have a Spawn game, you need to have good chain sounds. Mm-hmm. Like, that is a 100% iconic thing of Spawn. It's just like Spider-Man having a shitty web thwip.
There's not like a thwip. Yep.
Like, I guess we don't really know what shooting webs out of a canister would sound like, but like we can
it better sound something like
it's in the comic where it says thwip, you know, like we're gonna make the best sounding thwip that we can. Right. That's the best you have in. It
can be high
comics.
pitched, it can be low pitched, but it better sound like thwip, motherfucker. I swear.
You've just got letters smashed next to each other to make noises inside of comics to like give that auditory visual of like when you're reading it and like all these voices are happening in your head. Like, you know, bar the people who don't have voices in their head. That is a part of the population that I found very interesting. Do you have voices in your head? Like, I can when you read? When you speak to yourself? Yeah. Do you hear your own voice? No. Oh, you don't? I can make other voices. I can make other voices too. But I mean, I can hear my own. Reading, like if you have notes in front of you and you're reading, do you hear your voice? No. Oh, I must be a psychopath. I do. I don't hear your voice. I hear my voice. No, I don't hear my. This is a whole other tangent. I don't hear my own voice when I read, but like when I'm reading comics, I assign a voice to that character. Spider-Man sounds like Tobey Maguire to me, bro. Yeah, it's Batman really, sounds like Kevin Conroy. Yeah, and it is a lot easier. Like when you're reading something and you have that voice to tie. Get a visual aid too. I can mimic in my brain voices from people really well, but there's no way in hell I'd be able to like do that with my own mouth. See, it's funny. Like when I read Spawn Count, I hear Keith David because he's done so many of the games for Spawn, and then hearing no Spawn, no talking in this, it's kind of like during the little cutscenes, I'd be like, I hear Keith David. Yeah, and that's what I mean. Like we have that to tie to it, but we just like we don't have iconic like Spawn sound effects or Spawn music or anything like that. They really had to create something original from scratch to like fit anything. It's a good point, man. So I think it's 100% the weakest point. I don't put too much fault in it, but it's not aiding me. It's not like making me want to turn the game off or mute it, but it's not aiding me. I'm more concerned about some other things that are happening. I do wish there was a little bit more variety or specificity in some of the sound effects of like getting hit or the walking or the sliding or stuff like that, but it's definitely the weakest for sure though. I think it's more so jarring just because the rest of the game's so unique. Everything else is so different, but yeah, the music's good, man. I feel like it was music's definitely higher than the sound. The least focused of the categories that we go over. Definitely. So from least focused to one of the most focused portions, graphics. Yeah. So the graphics of this game, I think, are great. Not only do you have, actually, you know what? I won't go on. Brian, how about you take this one over? You start. Let's just start with the obvious. If you play this game for 5 seconds and you move Spawn's sprite at all, Spawn's sprite is so fucking killer in this game, dude. His sprite's badass. And it's not just like your idle sprite, right? Like he's got so many different moves and they all do something completely different. Like they spent time and effort animating the Spawn sprite, and it's so varied, man. Like even the cape gliding, like it gets huge. He changes size. The uppercut animation, he spins. The spin kick, he's spinning. The backflip. It's not just his body. Like the cape moves. The Spawn sprite is just like, I'm gonna start there. It's easy, low hanging fruit, but it is so fucking pretty. I mean, you've got the Spawn. Like you have a standing punch. You have a crouching punch. You have a standing kick. You have a crouching kick. You've got which he spins, by the way, because he can't. There's the low kick also, but yeah, and then you've got a chain whip. On a low, you've got a walk and you've got a dash and you've got like so many, like not only do you have 20 different moves, right? You've got 20 different moves plus the 8 special moves. So you've got 28 animations right there. You have to animate his jumps, his crouches, the gliding, the wall jumping, the wall sliding. Yeah. Like there's so easily much. Probably 40 plus animations just for the Spawn sprite.
There's you can like find, if you're an old school internet guy like me, like old fan pages, and there's like animated GIFs out there. And it was like, damn, I remember as a kid just like trying to find Street Fighter was and stuff when I was a kid. Like it was cool to see.
So you could put it on like your MySpace and shit.
Yeah, dude, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, this it's such a cool sprite. Like it's chunky, it moves, it's animated. It looks like fucking Spawn, which I think aesthetically Spawn's top 3 coolest looking superheroes there is. So like, what a treat, man. Like as a Spawn fan, it was really cool to see like his first game. He's represented well the way he looks, right? Because they could have just phoned it in, done some LJN shit where it's like, yep, he doesn't get a cape because we don't want to animate it. Yeah, they took some time and made it look really great. And that really not only just Spawn, like the backgrounds look nice. They're and don't go in expecting Super Castlevania 4. Like they're not. No, you're not gonna have parallax scrolling and stuff, but they're respectable. They're not super heavy animated, but they're detail, if that makes sense. Yeah, like you can see graffiti on the buildings, you can see open and closed windows. It looks good, and it looks better than your typical Super Nintendo game, I would say, especially for the era, like 95, like.
Right. I don't think the backgrounds and the environments are the best we've seen on the Super Nintendo. No. You know, I compare that to something like Mega Man X that we did on the podcast.
The whole game's crazy looking though.
Yeah, that game is beautiful, and the backgrounds have so much care into it. Yeah, huge studio. But it's not going to be something like that. No. Now, I also want to bring up how well done the pixels are for the cutscenes. Yeah. For you know, it's comic book style, it's still motion, but like you can easily make a still motion image in pixel art look terrible. We've all seen it. And even with the pixel art, they really got across this is a comic book. Not only is it a comic book, but it is a Spawn Todd styled comic book.
No, it's really nice to see that. As again, as a comic fan, I already briefly touched over it. It's very nice. The thing for me though, where people phone in this kind of shit, it's for comic books, especially like action shots, perspective, right? And they had some really cool perspective like shots, if you will, especially for Spawn, such an animated character. He's got the chains, he's got the capes. There's a couple I can think of, like when you punch the dude out the window and he lands on the cab, and then Spawn sees Angel like swoop in, like the angle and the perspective of like Spawn standing there. Awesome as a comic book fan. Like that's the kind of art I live and die for, man. Like super cool to see, and all of them were really well done. There's not one I can think of that looked like complete ass, like consistently throughout the whole game. Those were definitely some of the highlights as a comic book fan for me. And
I remember, maybe it's because I remember it because we had to do the damn Redeemer fight like so often. The Redeemer fight, the special effects of but he was like throwing statues at you, like he would like pick them up with some kind of levitating thing and he'd throw them at you, and then there was this huge like super beam that took up like the bottom quarter of the whole screen that you had to like jump and slow drop to dodge it. But getting to the very end of it and like kicking this dude out of the window for him to fly out of the window was so cool to see animated. It wasn't just like beat him up and he's like, oh, and then he just like falls on the ground. Like they took the time to animate kicking this guy out of a tall story. Shit of him. Yeah, you just like punches him out of a window and he flies out of the window. Spawn is talking to Angela in this cutscene, and they're doing this stuff, and like it kind of moves a little bit, like, you know, like a visual novel would, right? But then like you still see Redeemer laying like knocked out on the cab in the background of the panel. So it was just really cool to see that like animation flow straight into a still image, and like having that really action moment fly out the window and then bam, he's on the car and he's still, because this is a still image, but it makes sense, you know.
Todd will be proud, man. One of the things he always harps on when people were like, look at my portfolio, he's like, are your pictures moving? Yeah. Is it an action scene? Like I want to see the movement without it moving. Tell me that this is moving. Like, Todd will be proud, man.
So I just think it was a really successful level design in terms of like the levels leading into other levels or leading into cutscenes or that transitional kind of thing. A lot of people don't think about that, where you have a level and you fight, and then like it just kind of stops and then a cutscene happens.
Fade to black's the cheapest way out.
Yeah, fade to black and then just like something happens. So that like the linear transition of like we've gone from a battle to now a cutscene. Okay, now I'm not seeing the fighting image in my head. I'm like reading it on the comic book and I'm like living that experience. And then when that cutscene ends from the comic book panels, like I'm living the next scene of the comic book. So
what a treat for comic book fans, man. Yeah. Especially if you look at all the other SNES Genesis slop for superheroes. Like it stands out like head and shoulders above. My only beef with the graphics, and I think it's more for the time instead of this game in particular, especially the genre too. And enemy varieties, not great. You're going to fight the same thugs over and over, but
you're going to have the same thugs with an extra weapon.
But honestly, it's not as noticeable the further you make it into this game. Spoiler alert, you go to hell. Mm-hmm. I think it's the early stages when you're fighting like the thugs or whatever. It's the only time it stands out. But again, I'm not going to criticize this game because every game did it back then. But again, I think it kind of stands out because it's so jarring to the rest of the game being so unique. I wouldn't have been surprised if it was like, damn, I didn't see the same sprite once. It would not have shocked me at all for this game. This game, in every aspect, punches above its weight. Yeah. Except for maybe sound effects. But yeah.
For a game that punches above its weight, is the weight there in price and collectability? That was terrible. I don't know. So we're just going to go on to the next one. I'm really bad at transitions. Maybe I should just stop trying. Price
Necroplasm fade.
Necroplasm to fade to black. Price and collectability. The last topic we talk about before we really see, is this game worth the price? Todd McFarlane spawned the video game for Super Nintendo. Complete in box. It's going to be the box, the paper or the cardboard insert for the cartridge, the manual, a couple little, like the
tray.
Well, yeah, the tray, but I mean the little white operator manual.
Oh yeah,
they're not terms of service papers, but you know what I'm saying.
Starts with the D.
Like Nintendo, the Nintendo DS is really bad about having like the thickest packet of like white paper bullshit that no one ever looked at. It's got a couple of those.
The best part is if you ever need a complete box game, you can just look for a shitty sports game and pull one of those out and put it in the game away.
Yeah. And then one little ad, and it also had a Spawn the video game poster. So that is what makes up a complete copy of Spawn. Todd McFarlane's Spawn, the video game for Super Nintendo. Oh, registration. It had a registration card too. So one of those shitty little white things that like every Super Nintendo game came with: the manual, the ad, the registration card, and a poster. Just cartridge, we're going sold $20.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
18 with free shipping, $20. 11 with a boo-boo looking label.
Looks like I paid $4 for mine back in the day.
So you're looking at about a $20 cart. Maybe a little bit more if it's got a really clean label, a little bit less if it's a little beat up. Not terrible for a Super Nintendo game at all. Complete in box, we've got $200.
Well, especially for being first appearance of, what's the bad guy's
Mad
name?
One?
Mad One, yeah.
Yeah. Most recent sold complete in box with poster, all inserts, and registration card, $200.
Ooh.
So with shipping and tax, you're probably looking at $215, $220. We've got one quote unquote complete, no poster or extra bits. Look, to me, to be complete in box, it needs a manual.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are a little bit more picky where it's like whatever it originally came with, that means complete. For my personal collection, complete is the box, the manual, the game.
Same, honestly.
Poster is going to be extra, like I'm paying above. Or, whatever extra came with it. Like, that's me. So when I say complete, we're talking everything.
Right.
Complete in box, no poster, $130.
I will say the poster seems to make like a $30 to $40 difference.
Yes. This one sold for the manual and the box and the game sold for $100 plus like $20 in shipping.
And just like every paper box game, conditions everything. Here's a guy that got a fucking steal with the poster, but it's got a giant rat tooth mark in it for $65.
I mean, this one's box and poster only, sold for $72 plus $7 in shipping, so about $80 just for the box and the poster. So that's a super big deal if you piecemeal that together.
Yeah.
But you're looking at about, I want to say, I'm going to call it $120 to $150 complete in box. Depending on condition, depending on poster. So $120, $150, or $20 cart.
Fair.
is the game worth that much? Now, I do want to point out that's North American, and we won't go too much into the European version.
But if
I
you're crazy
don't
variant
know
collector
why.
like me,
Yeah, I don't know why this is so expensive, but apparently the European version of this game, complete in box, is worth over $600.
Yeah, I think the last one sold for complete in box $887.40
serious?
US plus $25.29 shipping.
Huh?
Yep, September 8th. And there's only 2 copies out there that sold. There is none currently on eBay for sale. Cart only, last one sold for $126.72. So I don't know if this is like a limited release over there, if it's rare. That's pretty wild though. It's pretty interesting. Because it released pretty close in Europe, if I'm not mistaken, right? I had it in my notes. Hang on.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it released a month later, so it's not like it was years down the road and it got held up in licensing hell. It's kind of interesting. I would love to know the reason why.
I mean, this cartridge loose is anywhere from... I'm seeing the range of 50 to 160. There's one that sold for $220. Yeah. So apparently this Spawn the video game is an actual rare game in Europe.
Yeah, even for just the loose cart not to be on eBay is kind of eye-opening, honestly.
Did you see this one that sold on the 8th?
Yeah.
Let me see if I can pull it up.
Here's a UK manual only sold for $95.09 plus $23 shipping.
So, this one, holy cow, why? All right, so the Super Nintendo Spawn PAL version, complete with box and manual. This box has stickers on it that say Big W all over it, sealed.
Yeah.
Stickers all over this thing. It's got a beat up manual. This sold for 12 bids, approximately $976 US. It was Australian sold.
Wild.
That's crazy.
This thing's beat
$697.
This thing's destroyed. That's crazy.
$913. $854.
It must genuinely be rare. I will say we got the better label for sure. That label's kind of maybe just the curvature of the cart, but yeah.
So, in one of the very rare instances where this game is a lot cheaper in America, but you also have to consider, like, Spawn was really popular in the US, and maybe he was not so popular in Europe.
I know he started late because Image had a lot of issue getting their shit overseas, and that's why if you find the overseas Image stuff, it usually has a higher holding than some of the Marvel and DC stuff.
I mean, like, everyone wants to talk about how everyone wants to talk about how Spawn 1 is like a rare key book, but dude, there is a million Spawn 1s out there.
It's a desired book. It's not a rare book.
Yeah, no, it's not a rare book. There's a boatload of them. I had like 4 or 5 of them at one point.
I've got 5 or 6 now.
I mean, if you want to talk about the misprints, or especially the one that's like no black ink on the cover, that's the blue version. Of course, that's going to be rare because that's not like misprint. Yeah, but we're talking. Not only do you have to get Spawn over to Europe, but you have to have how many languages translated.
Right.
So, for us, foreign versions of Spawn 1 from Europe are rare and sought after for that reason, because there's not a lot of them out there. So I'm going to imagine this is the same way.
I think so.
But that being said, like $1,000 for this is crazy.
Doing research, I was like, holy shit, did you see this PAL version? Yeah, it's...
No, I didn't see it till you mentioned it.
Kind of eye-opening, man. It's pretty interesting, because I first saw it in the app, and I was like, why is this so expensive? This has to be a graded one or something. Sure as shit not. So.
Yeah, and...
I love finding stuff like that. It's another reason why I love doing this podcast, honestly. Like, who would have known? And
I would love to know, like, I know how comic books are perceived in an American lens, and I would be very curious to kind of, like, exist in Europe and, like, exist in that comic book space and kind of see, like, how it is out there. Because I've got no perception of what they think of comics or how easy it is to access them or how big they are compared to here. Or it's like... Are your guys' favorite and most popular superheroes like the same as ours? Because I don't know. And then there's so many other countries with variations there that it's really curious.
It's really fun. And if you ever want to fall down a rabbit hole, you definitely can. I'm friends with some of like the most prestigious foreign comic book collectors in the world. And I mean, I fell down that rabbit hole very hard once the first time I talked to these guys. Just little plug there, foreign comic collector. They're all over social media. It is very interesting because I would say maybe 10 years ago, when this kind of started, this is kind of off topic, but it is interesting. CGC Boards is like the biggest grading company for comic books, right? There was a small little forum post about like, hey, finding these foreign books are kind of interesting, right? fell down this rabbit hole. Some guys became experts on it because they got sick of grabbing the same American. Like you're saying, Spawn 1, how many copies are there? There are 9.8. How many gems of Spawn 1 are there? Thousands.
There's a lot. Yeah.
So they're like, instead of chasing Nosebleed's grades, how about I chase Nosebleed books? Because like, how many Polish Spider-Man ones do you think are out there? You
right.
know? It literally is. You find ghosts and stuff. So give Foreign Comic Collector Magazine a follow on social media. It's really interesting to fall down that rabbit hole. But to answer your question, it's literally country by country, character by character, person by person. Like, my family's from Serbia, so I wanted to find a bunch of like Yugoslavian Spider-Man stuff. At one point, shout out to Matt Roybal, got me a first appearance of Punisher, Spider-Man 129, Yugoslavian. At that point, there was only 8 known in existence. Now we're up to like 13 or 14, but...
I mean, that's still a small number. It's a crazy small number.
The thing is, like, they just use them for toilet paper over there.
Yeah.
It's very different. Collecting that kind of aspect in some of these smaller European countries, not a thing. So it would be super interesting.
Right. It really is tableside reading material. Yeah. Like, there's a lot of countries with that. There is no collecting culture with things that we have over here. And I think now that especially we're a lot more global, a lot more countries are looking at our collectibles as also similar collectibles in the sense of like, oh, I do want that. But you also have to imagine like countries like that who didn't put such an important precedence on comics. Like they're going to see them as like the newspaper comic strips that come out every week.
Well, it'd be very blunt too, without saying any names for privacy's sake. There's people who literally is like, people want these overseas and I can get up on this ebay.com and make a living doing this. So they, hey, let me get your toilet paper.
Yeah.
Put it on eBay, make sale, and these guys make a living off it. So like, good on them. Like literally,
it's
their livelihood.
Supply and demand. Like you have the supply, but you don't have the demand in your country. Like you are able now to have that access to that demand somewhere else.
Really funny side story. To the point where there's countries where it's illegal to play the lottery. Right.
Yeah.
I had a Filipino guy that would send me Spider-Man Filipino comics for lottery tickets.
That's amazing.
So it's fun. It's a fun rabbit hole if y'all ever want to fall down that. I am curious for the video games. The only ones I know about because of this, IBM Spider-Man computer game came with a comic book. So I know a guy trying to get a complete like European PAL set for that. But you had the Amiga, the Spectrum. So he's like, I need one of each of these books, and tracking down that Spectrum was like a 5-year journey.
Yeah.
Like, these books are rare, so I'm assuming the games are kind of rare too.
Right. And I'm actually really, really surprised that this did not come with a Spawn 1 mini book.
Yeah.
Like, the amount of things that Todd tried to shove Spawn into. Or a trading
card or something.
Like, he just tried to shove Spawn anywhere and everywhere and any possible thing that he could. So, like, having the poster is really cool, but I am very, very, very shocked that this did not come with, because it's a manual.
Yeah.
It's a manual with the perfect size of being a comic book. Or I'm very surprised that he didn't be like, special, it's going to come with a Spawn 1 miniature edition.
Mail in for a figure, it would have been
a mail away or something.
Because the Spawn toys were a whole nother thing that were huge.
Yeah, so I'm really surprised that honestly, that's a missed opportunity, especially having that crossover of collectors of like comics and then games.
Oh yeah.
Like, sure, comic book collectors, if you're a comic book collector, you're not going to go for this game because there's no comic with it.
Right.
But they're gonna cross into that game category when comics start coming with them. I mean, there's games that you've been talking about, like 360 era, there's a couple that have comics with them, and they're sought after for that reason because they cross over in both categories.
Yeah, and again, good luck finding them complete and in good condition. Like, you think finding game manuals are hard.
Right. I mean, there's The Witcher, I think The Witcher 2 that has the comic book version is really expensive, and it's hard to find, and it's hard to find complete. So, missed opportunity for one, Todd, if you're listening to this, and I hope you are, that you should have released Spawn, a miniature Spawn 1 with this game. I am sad.
He's gonna get in touch with Limited Games and be like, let's make it happen. It'd be sick.
If you did, I'd buy it.
I'm down. Do it, Todd.
That'd be pretty cool. But is it worth the price? $120, $150.
So I will
make you in the middle at $135.
Right. I will say, man, playing this game kind of surprised me. I don't want to say it like floored me, but I thought this would be the most standard, typical, just beat 'em up, boring. This game does so many cool things where I think this is like, as a video game itself, not even including my personal love of Spawn or comic books. It's a super unique game. Is it a perfect game? No. Playing it, I had a blast. It was fun. I died over and over and over, and you will see if you watch the YouTube. but like I had fun the whole time. I was smiling, I was laughing, learning the moves was fun. I'd be like, hey, find a move where I can kill this guy. Like, what a fun game to play, man. And my biggest thing for going back and visiting these old games, because played a lot of games, man. Like, I'm running out of shit that I haven't played before with a different skin on it. This game stands out. And I don't think $150 is a crazy price for it's probably something that's going to retain. If you look at kind of the way the market's going, people our age want the shit we grew up with, right? Mm-hmm. It's kind of why the Spawn figures are going up again. This has some wiggle room, I think, on it. Honestly, if this movie ever comes out, this is going to go higher. This is going to go crazy. Yeah. This is the first Spawn video game, right? And there's been a couple, and he's got a pretty decent history with video games. I think this is a good buy at $150, honestly. I think this is worth it. I think the cart for $20 is an absolute hell yes worth it if you just want to play it and check it out. No question in my mind that cart is worth $20 all day, every day.
Right.
I would honestly like to upgrade because I have a pretty mediocre cart. But yeah, complete in box for $150. You get really cool art. The manual itself's actually really nice. It's got like character bios.
It's full color.
Yeah.
Full color
got, like,
manual.
All the moves in it. It's not just text. It's a beautiful manual. This game just does so much good, so many unique things. Like this surprised me a lot. This is like low-key sleeper, one of the most fun games I had playing on the podcast this year. Mm-hmm. Absolutely worth it, in my opinion. Not even a question about it. You get a super minty copy for $160. I don't think it's a bad investment.
Right.
I think it's got wiggle room to go up. All it takes is one YouTuber to do a video and be like, oh, this game's pretty unique and pretty cool. And this thing skyrockets. Like, yeah, worth it.
Yeah, sure. I think that I spent $120 on mine.
Oh, you did good, man.
I spent $120 on it, and it has the poster. I fully was not expecting to get one with the poster, and I was okay with that. And I opened it up and I said, wow, this has I was already set on buying it because it looked great. And then I said, oh, it's got the poster. Like, yeah, totally. And the poster doesn't have pinholes in it or anything. So that's how much I spent on it. And then, like, I already said it, I am not a beat 'em up fan. I don't collect beat 'em up. I don't play beat 'em up. I don't like beat 'em up games. And for me to buy this game as a beat 'em up, it's only because it was Spawn. But after playing it, I don't regret that $120 because of all of those special small things that they added in this game. Like, it wasn't just a beat 'em up game with a Spawn skin and then a couple of the Spawn guys that you fight in a Spawn area. It was like necroplasm, the necroplasm counter and all the special moves, and like the fact that they stayed true to like those transitions and like really trying to bring that comic book to a video game, like, was, I don't want to say show-stopping, because it wasn't.
It was cool as fuck, though.
It wasn't like a show-stopping, like an incredible beat 'em up. Oh my gosh, I love beat 'em up games now. But like now having I like having this game. Yeah. Even though it's a beat 'em up, I enjoy what this game is as a beat 'em up.
If it wasn't Spawn, would you feel the same way?
I don't think I would have the same tie to it because I wouldn't understand what those ties actually really meant. Like, I think to fully enjoy this game, you do already need to enjoy Spawn and how Spawn is. It's not like a game, like, here's the thing though, is like, I didn't really grow up with Turtles, right? Like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I really like the live action movies, and like, sue me because people say some of those are some of the worst things ever to exist, but like,
what?
Yeah, like some people hate the live actions with the suits.
Boy, come at me, I will fight you. Especially
I
that
loved
first one.
it.
The first one's great.
There was the Ninja Turtle cartoons, I really liked those as a kid, but like, I didn't really grow up on Ninja Turtles. I didn't have the toys. Like, Ninja Turtles was not my life. And the people who really like Ninja Turtle games are all about the beat 'em ups. It doesn't matter. Ninja Turtles is going to be great. And I don't know the nuances of Turtles to like when it sees on the screen to be like, oh, that's a nod, or oh, that's really cool, or whatever. It's just like, to me, it's a beat 'em up and I'm fighting Foot Soldiers, Foot Clan. I don't have that tie to it. So if I didn't enjoy Spawn so much to understand those nuances and to understand those tie-ins, I don't think I would enjoy it as a whole. So for me, I really think this was totally worth the price.
Yeah.
If I didn't know Spawn, read Spawn, understand how Spawn functions, I don't know if I would come to that same conclusion. But I feel like people, especially now who are more open-minded to beat 'em ups not being the same thing over and over and over, I think they would appreciate what this game did differently. Because it did do something different.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, if this wasn't a Spawn game, I would feel the same way, but having Spawn obviously fucking helps. You know what I mean?
Right, and I think that's the only reason that I would, like, take it all out, right? I think I'm not going to disagree about this game doing something new and unique and cool and whatever we all say when we listen to other YouTube videos. But like cool, unique, fun, you know, like it is very different.
You'd be right for once.
Yeah. It is a very different kind of it's a beat 'em up to its core, but it's very different when you talk about the counter and the ultimate, like the unlimited continues and like those kind of things that like other beat 'em ups don't have. Like they are throw your change in the arcade machine.
It's hard for the sake of being hard, artificially inflating it to make you spend quarters.
Right.
This is like it's hard, but it gives you the tools. Like this does, what a different perspective back then to look at the genre, right?
Right, and you take all of that, and then now you've thrown Spawn and the things that make Spawn special, and the things that make Spawn really cool, and like that added to it, it just adds another flavor to something that's already sort of unique, and now it gives it a real reason of like why they did that, right. and it explains like why we have these like design decisions for a beat 'em up style. It's like, no, is it the greatest beat 'em up ever? No. But it's one of the most unique ones.
Absolutely.
One of the most unique ones for sure. It's not just going across the screen and beating up dudes and seeing cool explosions. Like, it's got very specific, unique, like, gameplay elements that can only be explained because it is Spawn.
Right. For me, it's weird. I've been doing this for so long, playing games for so long, collecting. It's almost, in a weird way, just as important to me. Is it a good game? Does it stand out? Is it unique? Especially for this era, man. Like, there was so much just shovel crap back then. Like, this... Even for playing it now, that's a thing too. Like a lot of times people struggle with putting games with today's lenses on. I'm pretty good at it because I'm old. I'm a geezer, you know, so it's okay. But no, this blew me away. I was like, there's no way this came out back then. Like this, I wouldn't be surprised if this was like a digital release on a PS5 or an Xbox, like made in a retro style. It's got some feelings like that, you know. It's super cool, man. Like what a cool little pleasant surprise and great pick, by the way.
I would really love to see this kind of re-release, and I'm hoping that Spawn is really kind of pushing its success. Like, you know, Todd was talking about Spawn in Fortnite and like all this stuff before that happened with Call of Duty, and then it happened with Call of Duty, and we're like, okay, this one makes way more sense than you know, Fortnite or whatever.
Yeah, he was a mercenary. Al Simmons was a mercenary. Like,
right.
Great crossover.
For my own sanity, like put him in Fortnite because I actually play that game and not Call of Duty, but like. Right. You know, he's pushing him in other avenues. We're talking about a Spawn movie that's never going to come out. I mean, we're talking about a Spawn movie that's supposed to come out, you know, and we had a Spawn movie.
You know what? That movie takes unfair flack.
We had a Spawn movie. I will say
how much time we got?
But now we had a Spawn animated show that was amazing. That was such a great show. Good. And now we've got a new Spawn movie that's going to come out. And it makes sense for, you know, it makes sense as far as like Todd's overall picture if he dives into games again.
It's due up for a video game, man. You gotta think Spawn's history with video games. Obviously, this is the first. You got the Game Boy game, but the biggest one I remember as a kid was like Soul Calibur exclusive for Soul Calibur 2.
That was so awesome. Soul Calibur 2.
Killer. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was what a cool crossover. And then Spawn Armageddon was a cool game when I was a kid. It was like, Spawn's got his own game. Like, okay. The Dreamcast game was awesome.
And you also got to, you think about it, like PlayStation 2, GameCube, and Xbox era is kind of when those comics started to dip. It had that dip. And now we're back on that rise, and I think he's setting the stage. Yeah, he's setting the stage for so much Spawn and so much stuff. And like, honestly, Todd likes putting all of his fingers in all of the pies all at one time. I think he needs to reel back a little bit, especially with the figures. But
keep him coming
with but with what he's doing with Spawn, like I would not, especially with alongside the release of the movie, we could possibly see a re-release of some of these older Spawn games. Whether it's this one or not, I would like to. I think it would be really cool because I think the nostalgia of Super Nintendo is really popular with the age group right now that he goes for. And I don't think that's something that he wouldn't notice. But
he's definitely business savvy as all hell.
Yeah.
We're talking about a guy that literally bought one of the most expensive home run balls of all time just to get into the sports figurine business. Like, this guy's a genius when it comes to business and marketing.
Right, and I don't think that's outside of his purview. So I would really like to see, like, you know, a new edition of this release because we just got those original Spawn figures but reimagined as new ones, and it was a Kickstarter. And, you know, he's not the kind of person who won't revisit the old in a new fresh coat of paint for the modern times. And I really see the video game possibility, and I'm hoping it happens in a really positive way and not just like throw Spawn at the wall and see what genre it sticks to.
Yeah.
So I have a feeling that if this movie does go well, especially with coinciding releases of a lot of stuff, this could go up in price. Sorry, Europe, yours could even go even worse.
Yeah, good luck.
Specifically this one, I think because of the style and the genre and the era and the bubble of Super Nintendo, it has a lot of forward momentum.
Definitely. I couldn't agree more, honestly. Boring
So.
podcast for as far as that's concerned, but like, yeah, I agree with everything you're saying 100%. And again, this the modern era of like, you know, content creators influencing. This just takes one popular YouTuber to make a video about this game and be like, look how cool and different and unique this is.
I mean, we say that on every single podcast episode we do if the game's worth it or not. Like, that's just kind of...
It's the times we live in, man.
It's
honestly.
the times we live in the day and age.
We were talking about it in Discord recently, yeah.
Yeah, we were. So this could 100% be a game that does that. But $120 right now, I think it's worth it.
All day, honestly.
The European version, I'm going to tell you it's a no.
Yeah, the European version is kind of wild. I'm so intrigued though, man. Like, I feel like it's one of those games that people would just sleep on and wouldn't know. I've never heard any kind of uttering in the community about the PAL version of Spawn for Super Nintendo. You know what I mean? I
had no idea that was so expensive.
Like, I assumed it released over there, and that's about the farthest I knew about it. You know, pretty wild find, man. That's why this podcast is fun.
It's that to me is the Senti.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Senti for us is so damn expensive, but the European version of Senti is like about the same price as the Spawn.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of interesting that like I had no recollection of this at all.
Pretty cool find.
I find it, that's really cool. So ultimately worth it.
I think it's worth your time to play it, and I think it's worth your money to buy it as a collectible. I'll say that.
I think that the what do you call it? The idea that people said, oh, if you're a Spawn comic fan, like, this game is good. I don't think that really says all for what it is. I think, this is so hard for me to explain. I think if you're a Spawn fan, I think you are the person that will appreciate this the most. But that's not to say that if you are not a diehard Spawn fan, you can't appreciate some of the things that they did. I think that's articulated perfectly. So. It's a super unique game that happens if you like Spawn. You get a cherry on top of your milkshake, you know? Yeah. Yeah. So, Spawn, stamp of approval. Yep. 2 thumbs up. Next episode, Brian. Next episode is an off episode. So it's not about a game. It is about... It's about a lot of games. Exactly. No, I think it's a timely episode too. Backlog management. Somebody with a huge backlog. I wanted to share some ideas of like thoughts of how big's your backlog. What do you do to actually play your games so you don't just record YouTube videos and have them as your background. But it's funny. A lot of people approach this issue 100 different ways. Mm-hmm. So coming up with an idea of the way to do it. I love playing games. I don't know about you, Barry. It's why it separates us from some people out there who play our games. We're just throwing jabs this episode. But no, man, it's an interesting topic because everybody tackles it differently. And admittedly, I used to be really, really good at it. And I've kind of fallen back. And some of the ideas I want to present, I think could help me through that. So selfishly, kind of want to go with this one again. Yeah. But I think it's a good topic. As a collector, it's probably one of the biggest struggles you have. Do you keep buying? Do you stop buying? Do you play everything you have before you buy another game? No, I don't think collectors ever stop buying. But I think collectors are the ones with... some of the biggest backlog problems. For sure. My backlog's immense, so share some ideas how to get through it. Love to hear your guys' idea. This is another great thing about this community, especially this topic. We all deal with it in different ways. So yeah, it'll be a fun one to talk about with the fans. So, backlog management brought to you by Brian next time on the Collecti-Bros podcast. In the meantime, check us on a Discord if you want to talk about Spawn or beat 'em ups, or if you just thought we were full of shit, get on there, talk to us. You're that guy that wrote that review that said you're only going to like this if you're a Spawn fan. Yeah. Quote unquote. Yeah. Until next time, stay pressed. Glass ceiling broken, yada yada, Batman Beyond. Peace. See ya. Thanks, guys.